Dear students, dear faculty, dear guests, and I will specifically welcome some of our guests momentarily, but this is a very special day, as we've already heard during the liturgy. As I was biking here this morning on my almost daily bike ride from my home in Baden to Trumau, I was reflecting on all those years. I've been now almost 18 years with the ITI, so quite a large chunk of those 25 years that we celebrate today. And the first thing I thought was gratitude. I thought of gratitude. So I stopped, I picked up my phone, and I called my both predecessors. In fact, I called my immediate predecessor, Monsieur Hogan, and called, represented here today by his son, Pater Edmund Waldstein, left a message for Pater Edmund to pass on to his father, because obviously in the United States, where Michael Waldstein, my pre-predecessor, resides, it's probably a little bit too early to call. And it was a first moment of gratitude that I passed on to both my predecessors. And also I sent a message to our Grand Chancellor, Cardinal Schönborn, who at that moment, as you already heard, was on his way to the airport, and he is actually now flying to Syria, where he is visiting the churches upon the invitation of the Syriac Orthodox Patriarch Ephrem II. So those three I contacted and shared with them the gratitude, the joy that we have actually come at this point. And so I want to extend that gratitude today, starting to some people who are represented here today. And of course, first of all, sitting right in front of me, the chairman of our board and my very dear friend and mentor, Jim Holman, who's today joined by his wife, Claudia. And Jim, you know, if it weren't for you, I would not be here at the ITI today. You remember very well what happened there 18 years ago. And for those of you who have not yet met Jim and his wife, Jim has played such a larger-than-life role in the history of the ITI, and if it were not for Jim and his colleague members in the board, the ITI would not exist today. They have led us through their generosity, but also their wisdom, their patience, their advice through these years, these 25 years, in fact. Jim has been on the board for the past, 20 years, so quite a long time. And they have really guided us through these years, but have also always done that very quietly. So I want to start today with thanking you, Jim, and thank you, Claudia, for allowing your husband to spend so much time with us and to be so generous with us. And as I know from my own marriage, we men can only do these things when our wives support us with love and care, as you do, and as I'm very grateful that my wife does. And so great gratitude, deep gratitude goes to you for your leadership, Jim, in all these years, and your friendship and your generosity. And as I was continuing to reflect on some of the people I would like to thank, and of course the list goes on very long, so I will not do justice to all, but I just want to make use of the opportunity that there are some other people here sitting in this hall today who have played such an important role in the history of the ITI. I see Architect Hildebrand and his wife, who hosted the ITI in the Kartausergaming in the beginning years. I see Horst Leimer, who was a member of our board for many years, who was a finance director, and Sebastian will be able to tell us what a challenge that is. And Horst had that position also for some time, many years back in the ITI. And there are so many people who have quietly, silently helped the ITI grow throughout these years. I also see my good friend, Dr. Wolfgang Kropf, who has been the ITI attorney for so many years and who has helped us solve and deal with many legal issues. And then, of course, I am grateful to my colleagues here in the faculty and in the staff. Many of us have been here for very long. I think of our dean, Bernard Dollner, who has been here for so many years. I think of our chaplain, Father Uri, who has been in many ways the beating heart of the ITI. And I was also reflecting how many families have brought great sacrifices over the years for the ITI to exist. Many of our families, I think of all those families of staff and faculty members who throughout the years have offered up so much and sacrificed so much for the ITI to be able to exist. And this is just a summary. We have our benefactors without whom, plain and simple, the ITI would not even be able to exist today. It is their quiet giving, their support, their faithfulness throughout the years that has brought us to this point. So all in all, and please forgive me if I do not mention everybody at this point, but all in all, we have been very blessed. And of course, our special gratitude goes today to the one person who has been there from day one and who has carried us through so many trials and errors, joys and blessings, and that is, of course, our Grand Chancellor, Cardinal Christoph Schönborn. I was, to be honest with you, very sad that he couldn't come today, because I had sort of automatically expected that he would be there. But when he then told me that he was going on this journey to Syria, something that together with other people I have been working on for a long time, that His Eminence do that out of solidarity with our Christian brethren in the Middle East who have suffered so much persecution, I actually was overjoyed and found it very fitting that exactly on this day His Eminence travels to Damascus at the invitation of the Patriarch there. And as our guest of honor today, the General Secretary of the Austrian Bishops' Conference, Dr. Schipka, whom I'm so grateful that he attends today in representation not only of the Austrian Bishops' Conference, but also of Cardinal Schönborn, as he already passed on some words of greetings. I actually just ran to my office before this meeting started to see if there was a message from His Eminence, and in fact there was. He had just sent me a message from the plane asking me to once again express to all of you here his deep gratitude that the ITI exists and how much the ITI is a blessing in his life and has been such a great enrichment in his life. So we start this day with gratitude, and I think that is the most important thing. But before we open the academic year, then officially we have the matriculation and we have our keynote address by the chairman of our board. I also wanted to say a few brief words, especially directed to you, dear students. And as we pass on from gratitude, we also think of our founder, St. John Paul II, because that is such a great honor to have him as a founder. And St. John Paul II and his then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, said something repeatedly. And I want to briefly address this point to help you understand why it is so important that you are here, dear students, and why, to our new students, it is so important that you have made the choice to be here. Both John Paul II and Benedict XVI spoke very often about the dictatorship of relativism. This was a favorite theme of both popes, which they, I would even say, hammered on many times. There is a dictatorship of relativism that is flooding our society. And as I was reflecting on these words of our founding Pope, I was thinking, but where do we stand today, 25 years later, as to this dictatorship of relativism? And I have come to the conclusion, especially during the last years, that this dictatorship of relativism has turned into something unfortunately much worse, which I would like to call ideological totalitarianism. That is where we have landed as a result of this dictatorship of relativism. Ideological totalitarianism. I'm sure you are aware with what the word totalitarianism means. It means total control. And Hannah Arendt describes it very well in her very famous book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, that she wrote immediately following the Second World War. Totalitarianism means a system that wants total control over everything. And that is where we have landed ideologically with the world in which we are. And we see that in a couple of examples that I will very briefly give you. We see that, and I link that here to the visit of His Eminence today starting to Syria, to the persecution of the Christians, something that has been largely ignored in the West in the past 10, 15 years, ever since this started in the year 2003, after the invasion by the United States of Iraq. That's also when the persecution of the Christians re-intensified again by all the movements that then came out into the open. And this persecution of the Christians has been largely ignored by most of the West. And this is, in my view, part of this ideological totalitarianism, because the narrative that Christians are the most persecuted religion in the world doesn't fit very well in the current narrative that we hear in the West, where the West is only to blame for all the evil, where the West is only the perpetrator, and where there are all sorts of groups of victims, the Christians, however, are not included, although they are the vast majority in the world of the persecuted. So it is very fitting that our Grand Chancellor on this day of our 25th Dies Natalis goes to Syria to meet with the leaders of the persecuted churches. A second example of this ideological totalitarianism is, of course, that with which we all struggle, this woke culture that we are confronted with daily. This new political correct thinking, where it is no longer possible to say that a man is a father and that a woman is a mother, where the sanctity of marriage as the union between a man and a woman is considered not only an old-fashioned idea, but an outdated, dangerous, even discriminatory idea. It's a second example of this ideological totalitarianism. And a third one, and I realize this is a sensitive issue, but since we're an academic institution, we should not be afraid to also address that. A third example of the ideological totalitarianism is, of course, the way in which our world, especially our politicians and our leaders, are dealing with the current corona crisis, where a true, open debate of science, an exchange of scientific insights and scientific knowledge is not possible, where science is being suppressed, leading completely to an overreaction in the other direction. There is no free exchange of truly scientific debate. That is not going on because it does not fit a specific narrative. This is another example of this ideological totalitarianism where groupthink and only thinking in one direction seems to be what is allowed. Now, you might wonder, why am I saying this at the beginning of the academic year? And I will explain that to you with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Michael O'Brien. And he says, "There is no greater imprisonment of the mind than the illusion that it is free and superior. The prisoner who does not see his own chains feels no need to break them." I find this so fitting, because this is a challenge that we are facing in all these areas, the examples of which I gave, is that we think our minds are free, but they are not, because we are blind to the chains that we ourselves, that our society, whatever it is, has placed on us, putting us in the illusion that our minds are free, where very often they are chained. And one sign of us living in that illusion is that we think our minds are superior and that we are superior. And that's why I was very grateful for Dr. Schipka saying in his sermon today that especially also here at a place like the ITI, we have to be careful that we do not fall into the trap of intellectual arrogance, that we think we own the truth, that we are right, but that we know that only God is the truth and that we are in search of it. So, why is it important that you are here, students? Exactly for this reason, that you learn how to think, that you learn how to think independently of those chains, whatever these chains are, whether these are self-imposed chains or chains of society that make us unfree. That you become human beings that are capable of debate, that are capable of thought, of thinking freely, and that are capable of exchange, so that we can have a robust debate and jointly going on a road of understanding and coming closer to the truth in whatever area that is. So that is the reason why you are here, dear students. This freedom to learn how to think, this freedom to be open, to want to understand the text that is in front of you or what the other has to say or would like to think, because for that in our society there is ever less room. And I would like to conclude with a few words from Viktor Frankl. I just started reading a book that I hadn't seen before of him, and it's called Yes to Life in Spite of Everything. And in this book, Viktor Frankl, the great psychoanalyst who survived Auschwitz, in this book, we all, of course, know his famous book, In Man's Search for Meaning, but this is another book. In this book, he answered this question, what is the meaning of life? And I can imagine that many of you, dear students, in these past 18 months especially, that have been specifically difficult for young people because of the isolation. I can imagine that many of you might have been thinking, well, what's the worth of life? What is it worth? You know, what's the sense of life if you are locked up? And I would like to answer that question with what Viktor Frankl has to say. He says, we shouldn't ask that question. He says we should ask, what does life expect of me? What task in life is waiting for me? Or to put it differently, how can I serve society? And then he says, our whole act of being is nothing more than responding to, of being responsible towards life. None of us knows what is waiting for us. What big moment, what unique opportunity for acting in an exceptional way. That is where we find meaning. To ask ourselves, what is life asking from me? And am I going to be ready for this unexpected moment where something is specifically asked of me? And in order to be able to do that, Viktor Frankl says, we have to learn the meaning of the present moment. I find that such a beautiful sentence. The meaning of the present moment. We tend to get so hooked up with planning the future and worrying about the future and having fears about the future. But what Viktor Frankl says, and he knows because he lived through the horrors of Auschwitz, he says the meaning of the present moment. That is what counts. And then finally, he says, it is never a question of where someone is in life or which profession he is in. It is only a matter of how he occupies his circle in life and fills his place. How he fills his place. And dear students, as we go into the opening of this academic year, what I wish you and what I pray that you will receive the grace of this year is that you will find out how you are called to fill this place in life and in the world. Thank you.